morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we're going to be having a little bit of a look at a new supporter card. It's Koga's Trap. I like Koga's Trap. Koga's Trap is a rather nice card indeed. Our translation here comes from the lovely David Hochmann over at limitlesstcg.com/translations. And what it does is when you play the supporter card, your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned and confused. Cool. Poison says that they take 1 damage counter between turns and it lasts until they get out of the active. And Confusion says that if they try an attack, flip a coin. If heads, the attack goes through fine. If tails, the attack fails. And they take 3 damage counters. Both of these in one, pretty nice. You get the extra damage being dealt with poison, and you get the fact that your opponent essentially has to take a big risk in order to attack you, because if they're confused and they try attacking you and they flip a tails, it goes very, very wrong very, very quickly. The good news is we've actually got ways we can play around with this a little bit more. So in terms of poison here, we've got Survivor. Survivor is a fun little card which says that poison does an extra 10 damage between turns. So one Survivor out, and it was a pre-release promo. I'm showing that one just because it's better artwork. I love it. And if you got one Survivor out, 10 damage, plus the 10 base is 20. 2 Survivor out, 30 damage between turns. If you get all the way to 4 Survivor out, that's 50 damage between turns. Now, I'm not actually saying that you're going to be doing that. I don't think you are. I don't think you're going to get all of that damage on there. I don't think you're going to have 4 Survivor on the bench. But I'm saying it is an option here. And if you want an equivalent for Confusion, might I suggest the new Parasect we talked about a little while ago. Parasect's got a nice little ability that says your opponent's confused Pokemon take 2 damage between turns. Now, it is a stage 1 rather than a basic, but 2 damage counters between turns. So let's say you've got 2 Survivor, 2 Parasect, that's 6 damage counters between turns. Plus the 10 they'd usually be getting from poison, that's 7 damage counters between turns, and that's not including your attack. That's not doing any damage with your attack. That is just the extra damage you're putting on from poison and Confusion. This adds up very, very quickly indeed. You could even play around with something like Sea of Nothingness here, which says that your opponent cannot evolve or devolve out of special conditions. So they can evolve up, and they're still taking those special conditions. And what you're doing here is just forcing your opponent into a really awkward situation where they've basically got to get out the active or be taking damage while potentially not being able to attack. And sure, there's a whole bunch of decks around at the moment that are playing Ace Roller, which will be able to take advantage of this. And pretty much everyone's playing 2 to 4, usually 3 or 4 Guzma, which also acts as a switch and will therefore be able to get around this. But you know what? There are plenty of decks that are not playing enough Guzma and Ace Roller, and they need them at other points during the game. And okay, let's say they can use all of their Guzma as switching cards. Well, on the one hand, oh no, they're switching with Guzma. And on the other hand, hang on a second, you're not actually able to do very much here because you've wasted all of your Guzma switching. Now it's late in the game and you really want to use your Guzma as a gusting effect. Well, you can't, because you used all your Guzma for switching. You're having to use your Ace Roller to try and get around Confusion, but then later on in the game, you're 20 damage away from being KO'd. You desperately need an Ace Roller, and there are no Ace Roller left because you used them all to try and get around Confusion in the early game. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what is so gosh darned beautiful about this supporter. We all played back in the day of Hypnotoxic Laser, and if you didn't, it's still legal and expanded, so I'm assuming at some point you have. Hypnotoxic Laser is automatic poison plus sleep on a coin flip. And this is one of those classic examples of a supporter card being a souped up version of an item card. I used the example in a video recently how Ace Roller is a souped up version of Super Scoop Up. Well, Koga is a souped up version of Hypnotoxic Laser, and we all know how great that was. And if you head into the expanded format, don't forget you've got Verbank City Gym, which will put 2 extra damage counters on between turns for poison, and can be combined with stuff like Survivor and Parasect. It's a kind of supporter where you play it in the early game and your opponent's like, don't care. And then in the late game, you're still playing it, because remember in Expanded we've got Versus Seeker, and in Standard we've got Palpad and Lusamine, so we can get these back fairly easily. And in the late game you're still playing this, and your opponent's like, well, now I've got no way around it, now I'm flipping for Confusion. And the thing about Confusion is, right, if you flip for it and fail, your turn was putting 30 damage on your own Pokemon. That was your attack for the turn. Doing 30 damage is not a great attack for the turn. Doing 30 damage to yourself is an horrendous attack for the turn. And that is essentially what you put yourself in a position to do. Decks like Sylveon are generally trying to slow you down. So what they're going to be doing is playing cards like Crushing Hammer, but they're also going to be playing supporter cards like Plumeria to get rid of your energy. But something like this in a deck like that could be really good, because what they're trying to do by getting rid of your energy is stopping you attacking. So if they can play a Koga and confuse you and you flip tails on Confusion, hey, they've stopped you attacking. And remember, Confusion doesn't go away until you get out the active. So sure, maybe you flip heads the first time, but then maybe you flip tails a second time, and maybe you flip tails a third time, and actually maybe you never end up doing enough. And that's where this comes in so beautifully. Although I do need to mention that there are a few Pokemon that really do specifically benefit from this. And if we're going specific, there is none so specific as Venomoth GX. I did a video about that, I'll pop a link to that one in the description. But Venomoth GX has a lovely attack for a grass double colorless that does 110 damage. But if you've played Koga's Trap, you do 200 damage. 200 damage for a grass double colorless is great. But remember, you're playing Koga's Trap, so it's not actually 200 damage, it's 200 damage plus poison plus confusion. Well, that's just a little bit better. So it's a minimum 210, hey Zoroark? But if you don't get a KO, and when I say 210, I mean 210 before you bring in something like a Choice Band. With a Choice Band, you're up to 240, and Pikachu and Zekrom Tag Team GX is going down. So non-GXs just don't stand a chance against this attack. But even if you don't KO, even if 210 plus potentially Choice Band isn't enough, they're still poisoned, they're still confused, and if they're surviving an attack that does 210, they're either a GX that gives up 2 prizes, or a Tag Team GX that gives up 3 prizes. Yeah. They're not going to want to flip for confusion, because what if they end up KOing themselves, going into your turn, giving you 2 or 3 prizes, and going into your turn? Now, I did mention this in the Janine video, but I do want to mention it again very quickly here. Venomoth's attack also gives you immunity to basics if you play Janine this turn. And remember that we did get, we are getting in the same set, Lieutenant Surge's strategy, which lets you play 2 supporter cards other than itself, just so long as you're behind on prizes, otherwise you can't play it. Which means you could play Janine and Koga's Trap in the same turn, and that would essentially mean 200 damage, plus they'd be poisoned and confused, and you'd have immunity to basics the next turn. That sounds very much like fun to me. But we've also got 3 Pokemon that do more damage depending on how many special conditions are affecting them. So we've got Alolan Muck GX, which does a base of 10 damage, plus 70 for each special condition affecting it. We've got the Victory Bell that we looked at just yesterday, which does 10 damage as a base, plus 60 for each special condition affecting it. And then we have Alolan Grimer, which is a basic, which does 20 damage plus 50 for each special condition affecting it, or affecting the defending Pokemon when the one you're attacking. So yeah, all of those are going to love Koga, because Koga just puts down 2 special conditions. I mean, weirdly enough, Koga is exactly the same as Nihilego GX's ability, I say exactly the same. It's a one-sided version of it. So Nihilego does both poison and confusion, but on both active Pokemon, Koga does poison and confusion, but only to the defending Pokemon. Let's give Koga a score, and let's give it between 3 and 4 Wassies. We don't give half Wassies, that would be barbaric. It's a really nice supporter, which works beautifully with some particular Pokemon, seems to fit quite nicely into stall decks, and if nothing else, gives 2 special conditions in one go. You could do some damage with this. But I'd like to know how much damage you're planning to do with this, and you can let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, ladies and gentlemen, but please do remember the most important rule as always. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all of that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WasseyPlays for some more Wassy action. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.